Welcome to The Debate. This is part of Problem-Based Learning Lab, or PBL Lab, a segment of Project Plain Talk. So imagine you're tasked with building a civilization, right? Completely from scratch. Do you just, hand your citizens a hammer and a blueprint so they can start building shelters immediately? Or do you tell them to sit under a tree for a decade to figure out the fundamental laws of physics first?
I mean, if you're the one sitting under that tree and a winter storm is rolling in, you are definitely going to want the hammer.
Right, you absolutely would. But what happens when you need to build something that the blueprint doesn't cover? We are living in an era where our technological capabilities, driven largely by artificial intelligence, are expanding, well, faster than at any point in human history.
Oh, absolutely.
We are building these massive, incredible things. But there is a very real, very urgent question we need to answer today. Can a society achieve true technological sovereignty and sustainable innovation strictly through applied science, meaning short-term technological missions and AI integration? Or is an unyielding, almost a stubborn commitment to open-ended, curiosity-driven fundamental science an absolute prerequisite? I take the position that fundamental, curiosity-driven science is the irreplaceable bedrock of all technological sovereignty and, frankly, any future innovation.
And I take the contrasting perspective. I argue that in the AI era, prioritizing applied science, taking what we already know and just aggressively executing on it, is the most practical, sustainable engine for immediate social development. I mean, I'm looking at the reality of a world with incredibly scarce resources, and I see applied science as the only responsible path forward.
Well, let's ground this in a clear conceptual framework, because I think we need to move away from that old cliche, where theoretical science is the foundation of a building and applied science is the skyscraper.
Okay, so how do you see it?
Let's look at it like this. Fundamental science, so biology, chemistry, physics, mathematics, that is the process of inventing an entirely new alphabet. Applied science is taking that alphabet and writing a best-selling novel.
Okay, I like that framing. That works.
Right? And a best-selling novel is incredibly valuable. It moves people, it generates wealth, it solves an immediate need for the reader. But if you stop inventing new letters, your vocabulary is permanently capped. You are eventually going to run out of original stories to tell.
Yeah, but
And when we abandon theoretical inquiry because we want these quick applied results, we surrender the capacity to discover new laws of nature. We become incapable of generating original paradigms. And the great irony here is that artificial intelligence, this massive tool of applied science that is, dazzling everyone right now, is just a product of that fundamental alphabet.
well, sure.
AI is linear algebra and statistics, which is mathematics. Its neural networks are inspired by human neurology, a branch of biology. AI wouldn't exist if someone hadn't been asking weird, abstract questions about matrices and brain synapses decades ago.
Look, I don't disagree that someone somewhere had to invent the alphabet. Historically, fundamental science is undeniably important. No one is sitting here arguing that linear algebra didn't build the algorithms that are, powering today's generative models. But I look at the AI era and I see a totally different operational reality.
In what way?
If you are a developing nation or even just a modern economy trying to solve immediate crises, you don't need to reinvent the alphabet. The alphabet, quantum mechanics, basic genetics, thermodynamics, it already exists globally. It's published. It is a known quantity.
But knowing it exists isn't the same as understanding how to expand it.
True, but think about the sheer utility of what we can do with it right now. Applied research and highly specific technological missions are what deliver immediate social development. I mean, if you're listening to this, you probably use some form of AI to optimize your workflow, right? Or maybe you benefit from AI-driven logistics in your supply chain.
Sure, yes.
In fields like bioinformatics, AI is rapidly parsing genetic data to find localized crop variations that can withstand climate change. That is a measurable, life-saving impact. Utilizing AI as a collaborator to solve complex, real-world problems is delivering what society urgently demands today. The most ethical engine for a developing society isn't to sit under the tree pondering physics, it is the aggressive, highly efficient application of the physics we already have.
Okay, let's Let's pull on that thread of efficiency versus true autonomy, because the economist Dr. Manoranjan Dutta has this brilliant, terrifying warning about this exact mindset.
Regarding performance metrics?
Exactly. He argues that countries treating science purely as a performance metric, where you only fund research if it promises an immediate application or short-term deliverable, will ultimately lose the capacity to shape their own futures.
Because they aren't doing the deep theoretical work?
Right. He points out that this leads directly to a state of permanent dependence. If you only ever apply the science that other nations discover, you are forever reliant on them for the critical technologies of the future. You mentioned AI and supply chains. Look at advanced semiconductors or sophisticated MRI machines.
Okay.
You can import an MRI machine, and you can train a technician to push the buttons and apply the technology. But if you don't have physicists and engineers deeply studying electromagnetism and quantum spin on a fundamental level, you will never be able to build the next generation of medical imaging. You will just be waiting to buy it from someone else. You lose your intellectual autonomy.
Wait, hold on. When you talk about permanent dependence, I think you are really misinterpreting how global economics actually works.
How so?
If the foundational science already exists, developing nations absolutely should prioritize application. Think about the mechanics of lifting millions of people out of poverty. It requires immediate infrastructure, energy, and healthcare. If you focus on building highly impressive applied systems, you create efficiency. And I would argue that efficiency in a modern, hyper-connected global economy is a highly effective form of sovereignty.
But if you don't own the underlying ideas, how are you sovereign?
Because sovereignty isn't just about inventing the concept. It's about mastering the execution within your own borders. If you can master the application of advanced semiconductor manufacturing to solve your specific domestic infrastructure problems, you are acting sovereignly. You are taking global knowledge and turning it into local power. You don't need to discover a new subatomic particle to run a highly secure, sovereign digital banking system for your citizens. You just need excellent applied cryptography.
I mean, that is a very pragmatic view. But I would counter that applied science merely makes a society efficient, while theoretical science makes them resilient and truly sovereign. Dr. Duda makes the case that working on deep, unstructured theoretical problems actually trains the human mind to think across multiple scales. It trains scientists to reason under extreme uncertainty and build entirely new conceptual frameworks.
But applied science has uncertainty too.
Yes, but if you only train people to execute existing blueprints, you are essentially just training a massive workforce of skilled technicians. You are not cultivating independent thinkers or system architects.
I really think you're underestimating the intellectual rigor required for applied science.
Well, let me give you a concrete example. India's space agency ISRO. Their incredible success globally isn't just because they were efficient at applying known aerospace engineering. It was the result of a culture that deeply valued scientific achievement combined with sustained patient support. They didn't just buy rockets or borrow ideas. They built an entire intellectual ecosystem from the ground up. They had to deeply understand the fundamental physics to innovate around their own resource constraints.
Okay, but look at the actual mechanism of ISRO's success. ISRO is the ultimate applied technological mission.
Is it?
Yes, it had incredibly clear, strategic, highly applied goals. They weren't just scientists sitting in a room asking open-ended questions about the nature of gravity. They were given a specific monumental task: put a satellite in orbit, reach the lunar South Pole. That is exactly my point. Technological missions, the best-selling novels of your earlier analogy, are what drive the organization of talent. The mission forces the ecosystem to form, and honestly, this segues perfectly into how artificial intelligence is fundamentally changing the scientific method itself.
I'm curious how you think AI changes the need for fundamental inquiry.
It changes the speed and the necessity of human trial and error. I mean, think about how we integrate technology into research today. AI can simulate experiments and analyze data at a scale that is basically incomprehensible to a human brain. Let's talk about drug discovery.
Okay.
Historically, finding a new chemical compound involved decades of slow, open-ended inquiry, mixing things in a lab, testing them, failing. Now AI can map millions of molecular structures in a high-dimensional, latent space.
which is basically a complex mathematical representation of chemical properties. And it predicts how a new drug will fold and interact with a human protein.
Right, AlphaFold in similar models.
Exactly. It does in 3 days what would take human researchers 30 years. Because we have a tool that dramatically accelerates the how, the traditional incredibly slow method of fundamental discovery is simply becoming less urgent.
I see where you're going, but I have to stop you there because you are conflating computation with cognition.
Oh, come on.
No, really. AI is a powerful lens, but it isn't the eye looking through it. AI operates strictly on historical data. It optimizes within known parameters. What you described with drug discovery is interpolation, finding new combinations of known things. But AI fundamentally lacks curiosity, intuition, and the ability to ask why. It cannot extrapolate. It cannot make a conceptual leap into the bizarre and unknown.
Are you sure about that? Because pattern recognition at a high enough level looks an awful lot like intuition.
Let's look at the historical mechanisms of real conceptual leaps. Think about Max Planck. The year is 1900.
Okay.
He was studying black body radiation, basically just looking at how objects glow when you heat them up. The existing physics of the time simply couldn't mathematically explain the colors of the light being emitted. To solve the math, Planck had to suggest something completely absurd, that energy didn't flow in a continuous wave, but in discrete little packets, which he called quanta.
Right. It made no sense based on the prior data. An AI trained on 19th century physics would have just tried to fit a smoother curve to the bad data. It would never have invented the quantum packet, because the quantum packet didn't exist in its training set. Yet that bizarre leap of human intuition eventually gave us quantum mechanics, which gave us the transistor, which gave us the microchip, which ironically gives your AI today.
Okay, that is a fantastic historical example of fundamental physics. I'll give you that. But does that apply to everything? It applies to biology too. Look at Watson and Crick discovering the helical structure of DNA in the 1950s. They weren't trying to cure cancer. They weren't on an applied technological mission to create personalized medicine. They were just trying to solve a structural puzzle about a molecule. It was seen as a neat biological insight.
Sure, but
No one, no planner, and certainly no algorithmic simulation could have predicted that decades later, understanding that double helix would lead to CRISPR, massive biotech industries, and genome sequencing. The original discoveries were motivated by pure intellectual curiosity, not practical goals.
I hear that. And, I respect the romance of the lone genius uncovering the secrets of the universe. But if AI is doing all the optimizing and the interpolating, how do we actually train the human brain to do the extrapolating you're talking about? How do we build an education system for that? Because if AI can spit out the answer to a complex equation in half a second, traditional education is dead.
Which brings us right to the core philosophy of the problem-based learning lab. If AI handles the rote optimization, the human brain must be trained to navigate the unknown. The PBL Lab framework advocates a complete departure from rote memorization. We need to replace the passive consumption of facts with hands-on, project-based learning.
So practically, what does that look like in a classroom?
It means changing the questions we ask. Instead of asking a student to define photosynthesis, which an AI can answer instantly, use a Socratic seminar approach. You ask, why do some plants thrive in severe drought while others die?
Oh, I see.
Right. The student has to observe, hypothesize, and critically think. They might discover that certain plants close their stomata during the day to prevent water loss, which forces them to alter how they absorb carbon dioxide. The AI can give them the definition of stomata, but the student learns the actual process of scientific inquiry. Most importantly, the PBL Lab explicitly calls for us to normalize failure.
Normalize failure.
Yes, we need to teach students that saying "I don't know" isn't a bad grade. It's the actual starting point of discovery. We must celebrate the mysterious. There's a quote from Albert Einstein: "The most beautiful thing we can experience is the mysterious. It is the source of all true art and science."
It is a beautiful sentiment to normalize failure and celebrate the mysterious. It really is. But I am relentlessly pragmatic, and I have to ask, who's paying for all this beautiful failure?
What do you mean?
I mean, the economics of science. Let's talk about a very stark reality for much of the developing world. There was a recent parliamentary report analyzing global science investment, and it asked a pretty devastating question regarding developing economies. Can India stand with science on 0.02% of GDP?
Ah,
When your national investment in science is a tiny fraction of a percent of your GDP, how can you possibly justify funding the slow, uncertain, and intentionally unproductive early phases of genuine discovery? You simply cannot afford to subsidize failure on a massive scale.
so poverty means you aren't allowed to be curious?
No, poverty means your incentives have to align with survival and growth. When resources are that scarce, you have to align funding with short-term deliverables. You need patents, you need projects that guarantee a measurable return on investment. If a researcher has a limited grant, the economic reality dictates that they must be an efficient producer of applied solutions, like better water filtration or cheaper vaccines, rather than an independent thinker wandering the theoretical wilderness for 10 years.
I see why that logic is tempting, but it creates a self-fulfilling prophecy of mediocrity.
Mediocrity?
Yes, if you only fund what is safe, short-term, and guaranteed, you mathematically guarantee that you will never produce a Nobel-level breakthrough. The scarcity of world-changing breakthroughs in a given nation isn't a measure of their genetic talent. It's a measure of how much intellectual space that society allows for curiosity. Nobel-level work emerges from environments that tolerate failure and value original thinking over immediate predictable output. We cannot just look at a low GDP percentage and surrender to being a nation of technicians. We have to change the culture, which really comes down to the synergy between attention and incentives.
Okay, this is where the rubber meets the road. Let's break down attention versus incentives.
Attention must be the foundation. Public awareness, the educational focus in our schools, media representation, the culture must recognize the value of core sciences as the ultimate driver of human progress. Without an environment where asking why is celebrated, your incentives will fail.
I'm not so sure about that.
Hear me out. If policymakers and parents don't see the relevance of fundamental science, throwing grant money at a problem won't create lasting change. It will just fund more predictable, safe projects. You have to build a culture that values the mysterious before you can meaningfully fund it. You need media portraying scientists as curious explorers, not just coders typing on a keyboard. Attention must precede the money.
And that is where I fundamentally disagree with your reading of history. Incentives are the catalyst that actually drives the attention. You can't just tell a struggling population to value the mysterious and hope a culture of science organically blooms. Look at the real-world historical mechanisms. Take the space race in the 1960s.
Okay.
Did the American and Soviet public suddenly wake up one day with a deep philosophical appreciation for orbital mechanics and theoretical astrophysics?
Well, no, they were terrified of the Cold War.
Exactly. They engaged in a geopolitical competition. The governments provided massive financial incentives, enormous budgets, and a very clear applied technological mission: beat the other guy to the moon. It was the massive influx of money and clear goals that pulled the cultural attention along with it. The attention followed the incentive. Or look at the biotech boom from the 2000s to the present. What drove the explosion in genetic research? It was venture capital and patent law.
You're saying money bought the curiosity?
I'm saying money and patent protections created the career opportunities that allowed curious people to actually make a living. I mean, even the most passionate student might turn away from biology if they don't see a rewarding career at the end of it. You want to pull kids away from scrolling on their phones and get them into these problem-based learning labs. You want them utilizing massive open online courses like SWIAM or NPTEL to learn advanced engineering. Show them a clear pathway to a highly rewarding career. Scholarships, stipends, tax breaks for corporate R&D, these policy incentives create the economic environment where science thrives. The attention always follows the incentives, not the other way around.
I think we are looking at two sides of the exact same coin. But I stand by the idea that without the attention, without the cultural appreciation for the unknown, the incentives ring hollow. The physicist Edward Teller once said, "The science of today is the technology of tomorrow." If you don't fund the science of today, the theoretical, the weird, the uncertain, You have absolutely no technology to incentivize tomorrow. You just have a sophisticated iteration of yesterday's ideas.
Right.
If we only use AI to optimize applied science, we trap humanity in a closed loop of our existing knowledge. We need spaces where slow, curiosity-driven thinking can survive. Otherwise, the human ability to generate conceptual breakthroughs will quietly disappear. Louis Pasteur noted that science knows no country, because knowledge belongs to humanity and is the torch which illuminates the world. We need humans willing to carry that torch into the dark, not just AI algorithms installing brighter light bulbs in the rooms we've already built.
I appreciate the poetry of that, truly. But my position remains grounded in the immediate reality of our species. In a world of undeniably scarce resources and rapid AI advancement, applied sciences and measurable, short-term technological missions are the most responsible way to address immediate societal needs. We have the foundational blueprints. We have the alphabet. Using artificial intelligence to map high-dimensional data, simulate global weather patterns, and build the physical infrastructure of our modern society is how a nation achieves practical autonomy. It's how you feed 8 billion people, how you cure diseases, and how you adapt to a rapidly changing climate.
Yet despite our different priorities, I think we can find a profound point of convergence here. Think about the relationship between attention and incentives like a car and fuel.
I'm with you. Attention without incentives is a car without fuel. It might look great, but it's not going anywhere. You have a population of curious people with no funding to do the work.
Precisely. And incentives without attention are like fuel without a car. You can pump millions of dollars in grant money into a society, but if the culture doesn't value deep, critical thinking, that fuel just evaporates. It has no vehicle to drive it forward. Both are absolutely essential.
We definitely agree on that synthesis. It has to be a virtuous cycle. And regarding artificial intelligence, I think we also align on the ultimate caveat. AI is an incredibly powerful collaborator, but it is a tool. It requires deep human knowledge in the core sciences to be directed safely, ethically, and meaningfully. The algorithm might be navigating the map, but human intelligence and scientific knowledge must remain in the driver's seat, deciding the destination.
Exactly. It's about how we choose to integrate these breathtaking new tools without losing our uniquely human capacity to wonder why. We hope this discussion has illuminated the deep complexities of how we view, fund, and teach science in the modern age. If this debate sparked your curiosity, we highly suggest you continue exploring the problem-based learning lab materials through Project Plain Talk to form your own conclusions on this vital topic.
Yeah, there is a lot more to unpack about how we cultivate the next generation of thinkers, and we've really only just scratched the surface.
Indeed. And as you walk away from this debate today, I want you to think back to that alphabet analogy. Next time you marvel at a towering technological achievement, a new AI model, a reusable rocket, a medical miracle, ask yourself, are we still doing the slow, unglamorous work of inventing new letters? Or are we just hoping the alphabet we wrote a century ago will tell our stories forever? Thank you for listening.